afternoon. Uh, as you all know, a land acknowledgement is intended to recognize the enduring connection of Canada's Indigenous peoples to their traditional territories, to recognize the history of the land that is currently being shared by many peoples, and to recognize stewardship as a shared commitment of all those who reside in that territory. The practice of land acknowledgement is, interestingly enough, a replication of an indigenous practice that predates European contact. So we are hosting this event from St. John's campus of Memorial University in Newfoundland and Labrador. We acknowledge that the lands on which we are situated are in the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups. We respectfully acknowledge this territory as the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk and the island of Newfoundland as the ancestral homelands of the Mi'kmaq and the Beothuk. We also would like to recognize the Inuit of Nunatsiavut and Nunatuxavut and the Innu of Nitassinan and their ancestors as the original people of Newfoundland, of Labrador. We strive for respectful relationships with all the peoples of this province as we search for collective healing and true reconciliation, and as we honor this beautiful land together. I would now like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Emil Tompa. Emil is a professor of economics at McMaster University. He is a senior researcher at the Institute for Work and Health in Toronto, and he's the director of the Center for Research on Work Disability Policy, CRWDP. Emil, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Everybody can hear me okay? You good? Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so thank you for the introduction, Stephen. It's a great pleasure to have this opportunity to speak to you today. I'm just going to take about 5 minutes. And in that 5 minutes, I really want to go through our history as a center, the Center for Research on Work Disability Policy, because and talk a little bit about where we're going to go going forward, kind of thing, because we still have lots of work to do. And so the real focus today is starting that way forward. And I'm really pleased to be part of this initiative and part of the Atlantic consultations, because I always found that Atlantic provinces were way ahead of everybody else. This is the first pre-conference consultations we were having this fall, sort of thing. So it's lovely to see you guys, moving forward on this initiative. The CRWDP initiative started back in 2013, so we've been operating for about 7 to 8 years. Our last funding year is this year, which will be ending in March. So it's a really good time to reflect on where we've been and where we're going looking forward. Next slide, please. So these are the goals that we identified as a center way back in 2013 when we first got together to start up this initiative. And I think they're still really relevant today. It really reflects also when we read through them, I see how it resonates with a lot of the things that we've been doing over these last 7 years. So the first goal was to provide a forum for within and cross-provincial national dialogue on challenges and opportunities for improving the work disability policy system. And the Disability and Work in Canada initiative is a real example of how we've done that. This cluster, Atlantic Province cluster meeting reflects that opportunity for dialogue. Our national Disability Work in Canada conference also reflects that opportunity to bring all of the stakeholders together to have that ongoing dialogue. The second goal was to identify problems and challenges associated with program coordination and complexity. That's been an ongoing theme through a lot of the work we've been doing at the center, both in terms of research and knowledge mobilization. On a yearly basis, we have a federal provincial policy roundtable where we talk to policymakers about this issue, about some of the challenges in coordination and complexity. The third goal was to identify relevant and favorable alternative approaches to systems design and service provision. That's an ongoing activity. There's still probably lots of work to be done here, but we're constantly thinking about ways to think about how we can coordinate the disability policy system in a way that is more inclusive and accessible to all the people who need those supports when they need those supports. So that's an ongoing objective that we keep striving to improve on. The fourth goal is to mobilize knowledge developed within and outside the initiative in order to inform policy. So that knowledge mobilization piece is a constant in all our work. We always try to take our work to that level where we're having it included in the dialogue with policymakers, with persons with disabilities, with community groups, with employers, with all of the stakeholders. And the last one is to build capacity for partnered engagement, engaged research, and knowledge mobilization on the topics of work disability policy. So capacity building has been an ongoing theme for us, trying to increase the number of people involved in the initiative, increase training for new academics, through the post-secondary educational system, get more partners involved in the initiative, so that capacity building is something we've striven for throughout those 7 years. Next slide. Okay, so this is our mandate here that we identified back when we started operation back in 2013, still relevant today, builds on our goals that I just went through in the previous slide, building capacity for research. That's what we strive to do on an ongoing basis, building capacity for active partner engagement, and then building a consensus on a roadmap for work disability policy change. And that really reflects what we've done with the strategy, working with the community groups to develop that strategy, which we're now trying to put into action. Next slide, please. Okay, so the Moving Forward Together strategy, Disability and Working Canada initiative really reflects that idea of us partnering with community groups to look to how we can improve the work disability policy system in Canada. It originally started that group as our community caucus with CRWDP, and now it's an initiative unto itself. We started off with ONIWIG and CCRW and Inclusion NL to think about how we as a community group can move forward in this area of work disability policy and developing a strategy for Canadian society. And it's come unto itself and is an initiative that now we spearhead on a regular basis. Federal provincial policy roundtables on an annual basis, the annual stakeholder conference, we've developed the strategy, and now we're trying to get that strategy into action. 2020 marks the 4th yearly Disability Work in Canada conference, which this year, as you know, we'll be holding virtually. Next slide. So this is some of the outcomes we were targeting when we first started up, and they're still relevant today. Our ultimate goal was to improve the Canadian work disability policy system. There's clearly work still to be done there, but we're trying to make advances on that. And we've also tried to establish an applied work disability policy field of study, because it wasn't an area that new academics could get training on back when we started up in this area. It was an area that pulled on disciplines across various social sciences and natural sciences as well, health sciences kind of thing. So we're really trying to bring that into a world of its own, where it's a legitimate area of study for new academics. And I think we've done a good job of mentoring a lot of new academics in this area to go forward and doing this kind of applied research that's really central to advancing knowledge base around work disability policy systems. Next slide, please. So I think we've made huge progress. I've tried to list some of the key initiatives that we've undertaken over that 7 years. I'm sure we're not doing justice because there's lots of things happening all the time. I think of it almost like an onion. That's why I have that picture of the onion there, where we have some core activities that we're really close to, and then layers of it that are somewhat removed sometimes from the core activities, but we're connected with. And so sometimes we're not always in tune with all the details of some of the community groups are doing that have been sometimes spearheaded or initiated through some of the people that are involved in our research center. We have more than 60 academics across the country in 4 clusters and more than 60 partners involved in it. So it's really hard to frame all of the details of the activities and give them all justice. But one of the key ones obviously has been the Disability and Work in Canada initiative, the strategy we developed, the annual conference, and the annual federal provincial policy roundtable that we hold. Another key one has been the development of a work disability management system standard. It's called CSA Z1011, and we're having a series of webinars about that standard on an ongoing basis that started back in September, and so you might check out the CRWDP website and join some of those webinars. There's two a month being held from between now and the spring of next year. We built substantial capacity for partnered research and knowledge mobilization, including mentoring on dozens of new researchers at the graduate and postgraduate levels. We funded a number of seed grants and other projects, so there's lots of great work that's been done over those 7 years in terms of research. We spawned dozens of spin-off projects. A key one has been a shared partnership development grant on wage subsidies and other financial incentives that are used by service providers and employers to create employment opportunities for persons with disabilities. That's an ongoing project. We undertook a large study for ESTC on the cost of exclusion, in which we've identified the untapped potential of 338 billion, or 18% of GDP, in terms of the potential if we were fully inclusive and accessible for all persons in Canadian society. That's going to be part of a special issue of a journal on equality, diversity, inclusion that's soon to be released. But there's still lots of work to be done. So the next slide talks about the way forward. So if you go to the next slide, please. So we're calling it CRWDP 2.0, but we actually have an official name for it. We're calling the Ideas Social Innovation Laboratory. So this is the next generation of the work we want to do. It's really in the early stages, just in the planning stages, but we have some sense of where we want to take this work. It's going to be a transdisciplinary partner-driven initiative, really focusing on expanding capacity of employers to leverage the talent and opportunities offered by persons with disabilities via a transdisciplinary, multi-sectoral social innovation laboratory. And we'll hopefully identify and pilot and evaluate co-design solutions. So things meant to be put into action in the workplaces and in the disability policy arena. We have 4 thematic hubs that we'll be focusing on: workplace systems and partnerships, inclusive environmental design, employment support systems, and transitions to work and career development. So those would be the 4 core activities, and lots of projects within those 4 core umbrella areas. The plan is to integrate the social sciences and health sciences, as well as physical science. So especially engineering and expertise in design, the built environment, and information technology will be a critical part of this social innovation laboratory. So really encompassing a lot of different disciplinary areas in this transdisciplinary research and partnered knowledge mobilization initiative. Next slide, please. And that's it for me. Thank you very much for having me speak about where we're going with this initiative, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the day's activities.
Thank you, Emil, and thank you for your inspired and effective leadership of CRWDP and of 2.0. The next speaker is Alec Farquhar. Alec is a lawyer by training who has a long career in workers' comp and in occupational health and safety law. He's currently the chair for engagement of the Center for Research in Work Disability Policy, CRWDP, and a key member of the steering committee for the Initiative on Disability and Work in Canada. Over to you, Alec.
Thanks so much, Stephen. Thank you, Emil. Thanks to everyone who's organized this great event. And I am finding sometimes these virtual events, more people can come. It makes quite a difference. So there are a lot of positives in spite of the many, many negatives. And I'll be trying to work through the negatives to get to some real positives by the end of my presentation. And I think my job is to help frame some of the discussions where we go from here. But I want to start with something that illustrates the tremendous value and the unpredictable outcomes of being sincere about partnerships and about working with a wide range of people. And that is the relationship we've developed with Arlene Dunn, who is now New Brunswick's new Minister of Aboriginal Affairs, Immigration, Economic Development, and Small Business. She was very recently elected in their last provincial election. And of course, Arlene's somebody that many of you have gotten to meet at our Disability and Work Canada conferences. She's been a strong supporter in her work in the labor movement and the building trades for the employment and advancement, respect and inclusion of persons with disabilities. She's been a tremendous champion of intersectionality in terms of addressing other barriers that might make it even harder for some persons with disabilities to make their way in the workforce. So when Arlene was elected, I knew this event was upcoming, so I sent her an email. Maybe it was the first one she got, and said, there's this great meeting happening on October 28th. Would you be willing to send a message to the group indicating your support and what this is all about? So I'll read the message and then I'll make a brief presentation. This is from Arlene Dunn. And I think we'll make this available afterwards, but we sort of wanted it to be a little bit of a surprise. I wanted to take this opportunity to send you all a virtual shout out. I want to thank and congratulate the organizers of this important meeting, and I look forward to hearing about some of the items that come forward for discussion. As many of you are aware, prior to making the leap into politics, I spent many years advocating on behalf of individuals with a disability and Indigenous people. This is important work. I want to assure you that I will continue to be a strong advocate. It's very reassuring to me to know that all of you are continuing to move these important files forward. In New Brunswick, our government is very aware of the disproportionate impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on vulnerable populations such as persons with disabilities, including the effects on their labor market participation. Together with our federal partners, we are working to collect information about those impacts. It's so important to ensure that the necessary supports are in place so that the labor market gains made in recent years are not lost. While COVID presented many challenges, it has also opened a few doors. For example, many employers have come to realize that working remotely can be just as productive and effective as working from the traditional workplace. For some persons with disabilities and Indigenous people, the ability to work from home would eliminate traditional barriers such as lack of public transit and workplaces with accessibility issues. We all know there are labor shortages in almost every sector of Canada's economy. And we all know there's no reason persons with disabilities and Indigenous people can't fill many of those roles. From a human rights perspective, it's important that we continue to do all we can to ensure persons with disabilities are able to participate meaningfully in the workplace. But it's also very important from an economic development perspective. It is simply the right thing to do, period. As we begin to implement our economic recovery from the negative impact of COVID-19, it's crucial that no one gets left behind in those efforts, especially our brothers and sisters who live with disabilities and Indigenous people. Rest assured, my commitment remains as strong as ever was to continue to be a strong advocate. I encourage you to continue your important work as we strive to become a more inclusive society. Have a great day, and thanks to Alec for allowing me the opportunity to say a few words. The Honorable Arlene Dunn, and this is her list of ministries: Minister of Aboriginal Affairs, Minister responsible for Economic Development and Small Business, Minister responsible for Opportunities New Brunswick, and Minister responsible for Immigration. And you'll see that makes Arlene a crucial player in New Brunswick in terms of looking toward the future and very sincerely and deeply seeing the full included role of persons with disabilities in that future. So thank you, Arlene. And I think, I hope that was a really nice surprise and a little bit of a ray of sunshine for people to see somebody with such a crucial role in the Atlantic provinces stepping up, knowing who we are, knowing what we do, and supporting it fully. And I better expand this here so I can see everything. There we go. So I have 3 objectives today, sort of following up on Emil's presentation. I'll provide a little more background on the Disability and Work Canada strategy. I'll identify current challenges for making real progress on why we're here today, employment of persons with disabilities, and start the conversation on how best to meet those challenges and move forward together. And I know that's really the bulk of today's event. Next slide. We all know these aren't new problems. Persons with disabilities have experienced tremendous barriers to inclusion and employment for a very long time. Over the years, numerous disability organizations, civil society partners, activists, and governments have addressed those barriers and developed programs and strategies intended to make progress. I've been part of these efforts myself, and interestingly, my parental connection is also there because my father's father, my Nova Scotia grandfather, was a senior official in the Nova Scotia Public Service, and he worked on these issues in the 40s and 50s. So this has given all of us much to learn from and build on. Disability and Work Canada has been a recent, very important initiative to coordinate these many efforts and provide a framework for collaboration and increased impact. Next slide. We came together, as Emil mentioned, as a small but mighty coalition, including Inclusion NL. Kathy was there from the start. She's had to pull back a little bit this year due to the load of everything else, but she played an enormous role. The Ontario Network of Injured Workers Groups, which is a frontline grassroots group. The Centre for Research on Work Disability Policy, which you've heard from Emil about. The Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work, headed by Maureen Hahn, who many of you know, and who has staff in Newfoundland. And the Ontario Office of the Worker Advisor, where I was then the director. We consulted widely, starting in 2017 and especially in the spring of 2019, and developed a draft strategy on disability and work, which was launched in December 2019 at a national conference. And that one was in person with over 200 people, very energetic group. And by then we had achieved significant support from across Canada, from persons with disabilities, governments, especially the federal government, which gave us some much appreciated funding, labor, employers, disability organizations, and researchers. We built some strong foundations, and with Arlene Dunn, you just saw the evidence of what that can mean. Next slide. Now, this is really important and a very conscious decision on our part. We have never intended to replace anybody else's strategy. We know that probably right at this meeting, there are folks who want to make sure that people with a specific type of disability, people facing specific intersectional challenges, people who have been left out and marginalized for a really long time, have put a lot of effort into figuring out a way to win inclusion. So there are a lot of strategies. Some are local and small scale, some are national. We're not trying to replace them, but we are overtly trying to provide a framework to help bring greater coordination and impact to everyone's efforts, sort of like a virtual meeting space. Now, our strategy is not a governmental policy. It's not mandated by legislation, although there are a lot of elements in the strategy that are mandated, such as human rights. It's a consensus-based strategy. That has a lot of disadvantages. It means that we can't tell anybody what to do, but it has a tremendous advantage that people feel safe with us, feel safe working with us, and that we can move forward in a more nimble and independent way. We don't have to wait around for a federal provincial table to decide what can be done, if anything. We aren't subject to who wins an election. We just keep going, and hopefully we keep growing. So at our 2019 conference, there was just tremendous collective energy. The voice of persons with disabilities was heard loud and strong, along with all the other players. Many people stepped up to join Disability and Work Canada working groups to help move the strategy forward. And then something happened. Next slide. Really eerie and unfortunate, but it's reality. Within 2 months of the conference, just as we were getting going on the working groups and many other things, COVID-19 arrived. And as everybody on this Zoom call knows, it has changed everything, including very much so the on-the-ground realities for persons with disabilities and the overall context for employment. We've got anecdotal reports from a lot of people. We have survey data, and it all shows the same thing, that many persons with disabilities have, I would say, disproportionately either lost their jobs or faced the threat of job loss. And then added to that, COVID-19 has created additional challenges for the basics of daily life, navigating transportation, disability supports, other issues. So it's sort of a double whammy. And some related financial costs. A lot of our partner organizations and a lot of the players in the field have had to reorient their efforts, focus on COVID-19. Many have seen revenues reduced. They've had to redirect resources dealing with COVID-19. We have employers who've been genuine, strong supporters of inclusion and employment, but they are struggling and they simply can't step up like they used to be able to do. Next slide. And you can already see the future, and there are parts of the future that are troubling. We've spent so much money just to get through this phase. Will we have that much money next year? Can we sustain this of spending. So it's anticipated that there will be fiscal constraints of significant proportion. We also have powerful economic sectors pressing for relief, and rightly so, airlines, hospitality industry, and many others. Well, their voices are influential, and not many of them are speaking about disability as a consideration in recovery planning. And this is not to blame, not to be negative. They're fighting for their very survival, and their focus is on their bottom line and the realities of business. There's so many voices crying out for help that governments, quite understandably, may tune out all but the most urgent. And I'm sure that's on everyone's mind here. Well, that is not an unfamiliar place for persons with disabilities and their allies to find ourselves in. I would say it's more or less the usual place we find ourselves in, unfortunately. Next slide. So, what are some opportunities and pathways? I'll finish off with this. I believe that until recently, quite a few of us were thinking, what's going to be happening? Are we going to get support? Are we going to be left behind again? But there are some major opportunities. Can we use this moment when Canadians have realized that we're all in this together to make sure that we includes persons with disabilities fully? So we'll need to do some strategic thinking and take collective action. Next slide. Let's start with the throne speech. I put it in red to really emphasize. I know when I read it, I just thought, oh my God, I can't believe I'm seeing these words. And I'm thrilled. COVID-19 has disproportionately affected Canadians with disabilities and highlighted longstanding challenges. The government will bring forward a disability inclusion plan which will have, first, a new Canadian disability benefit. Second, a robust employment strategy for Canadians with disabilities. Third, a better process to determine eligibility for government disability programs and benefits. Just a few words in a long, long document on one day in the politics of Canada. But man, are those important words. Next slide. As I mentioned, I was thrilled, but I've been around long enough to be realistic. I view this as a foundation, an opening, but it won't happen without our full and determined engagement. Now, a second opportunity is the sometimes extraordinary collaboration in civil society in Canada in response to COVID-19. I would say significantly different from the US, and one reason why we're doing so much better than they've been doing. One key example, early on, the Canadian Labour Congress and Canadian Chamber of Commerce jointly approached the Prime Minister with a high-level proposal for the response and recovery. This was Hassan Youssef and Perrin Beatty. We're seeing this sort of collaboration at the sectoral level. I know a lot about the automotive, manufacturing and construction sectors in particular, and the workplace level. How can we get a way for the disability lens to be included in these conversations and initiatives? Next slide. And third is the state of mind of the general public. I would say, like everybody here, I've been rethinking my priorities. Canadians are rethinking their priorities. Many of us are at home when we might have been traveling or out in the world more. Although we may not be facing it in our own families, we know that society is facing a life and death situation. That clears away unimportant things. It helps us find the best in ourselves. It opens our eyes. I'll just give one example, systemic racism. I don't think it's any accident that it's being noticed at a time when everybody's thinking, what can we do better next time around? So why can't the new vision and thinking that emerges from this time include disability? Next slide. Here's some very, very outline ideas for a strategy going forward. First of all, use the upcoming DWC conference as a platform to press for making the throne speech commitments real. And this is just an outline of the conference. Take a look at the way we've structured it. It's 4 afternoons, November 25, 26, December 1 and 2. And we have Bob Ray opening the conference, a longtime friend who's been involved in these issues for a really long time since we were together in law school. He accepted instantly to come. And his focus will be, now that he's Canada's ambassador to the UN, and we've got 2 more minutes and I'll be on time. addressing our issues from the international human rights perspective, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Following Bob, Minister Qualtrough. I believe she's attending in person. So we've got an ambassador, we've got a minister, then we'll get to work on progress in the workplace on the second day, strengthening supports for workers on the third day. The fourth day, now this is still a work in progress, keep it a little bit confidential, but I'm well along the way to what I hope is going to be a joint CLC Chamber of Commerce presentation, where there'll be a commitment to include disability and employment as a recovery, crucial part of the recovery. I think the next one's the final slide. Can we identify players and partners that we haven't engaged sufficiently with in the past and connect with them? We started with Arlene Dunn, who can help us position disability and employment as part of the economic recovery, not just a human rights issue. Can we take advantage of the new workplace? Arlene gave us some ideas on that. There's downsides to working at home, but some upsides. Can we identify sectors of the economy which haven't traditionally been seen as receptive to persons with disabilities? And can we undertake an ambitious public campaign highlighting the costs of exclusion and the benefits of inclusion? And for that, we have the groundbreaking research of Emil Tompa, which I believe shows that up to 17% of our gross domestic province is, in a sense, misdirected and wasted because we're excluding people with disabilities. It's a staggering toll in the multi-billions, really the equivalent of the toll of COVID or something like that. I think that's my last slide, because what do you think we should do? We're all in this together, and let's figure out a way forward. Thank you for inviting me, and looking forward to the rest of today's discussion.
Thank you, Alec. The next speaker, building on Alec's presentation, is the Director of Inclusion NL, Kathy Hoggins, who will introduce herself. Over to you, Kathy.
Thank you very much. I am just doing a little bit of a logistical switch here and passing the co-host reins back over to Laura while I am facilitating this process. Good afternoon, everybody. Really happy to see you all here. Wow, what a great turnout that we've got. So building on what Alec had talked about in terms of the national strategy, I felt that it was really important for us to have a conversation about what is currently happening in Atlantic Canada and in the inclusive employment sphere, and for us to take a few minutes to talk about what types of services we do have offer. Of course, many of you know that Inclusion NL is the corporate program of Empower, the Disability Resource Center. And we provide services and solutions specifically to businesses who are interested in building their disability confidence and helping them to provide supports around what that looks like to hire individuals, but to also provide accessible services to their current employees as well as their customers with disabilities as well. What are other people out there doing in community to help to support the advancement of inclusive employment in Atlantic Canada? I know that we've got a lot of people from diverse backgrounds here, but if I could just immediately pick on Megan Kelly from CCRW, because I know that she's in the audience and can share some information about what CCRW is doing, and perhaps we can go from there. So Megan, over to you.
Sure, thanks, Kathy. CCRW, while it is a part of the Disability and Work in Canada Conference on a national level, as part of the committee, on a local level here, specifically in St. John's, Newfoundland, we run two programs. So one that is an employment program specifically targeted for youth with disabilities, and that provides opportunity for training and navigation for entering the labor market or re-entering the labor market in a supported environment. We also run the Partners Program, which is an enhanced employer support focused program that looks to connect employers looking to hire talent, from the population of people with disabilities, with the roster of skilled candidates that are accessing our services here in the city. We also partner really closely with a lot of other really great organizations who are supporting, the job seekers with disabilities in the community, as well as the employers. I think I saw Shelley from Avalon Employment on the call today as well. And I believe Sherry Tucker, some of the other advocates in the community who are providing really important frontline services to the employers and the job seekers here in St. John's specifically. We also have a presence in Halifax, Nova Scotia, as well as a couple sites in New Brunswick as well. So in the Moncton region, as well as St. John, New Brunswick. We're working with, youth with disabilities, job seekers with disability, as well as students, to ensure that they have the support and advocacy that they're looking for to enter into the labor market or re-enter into the labor market with an employer who is disability confident and inclusive, and is going to provide anything they need to be their best selves at work so that their skills can shine. And I get to work at the site here in St. John's, but my work touches, everywhere across Canada. I'm the National Manager of Business Solutions for CCRW. And we're working to provide professional business solutions for employers who are looking to become more disability confident in their policies, procedures, and sort of ensure that they're able to survive and thrive and attract the talent that they're looking to attract, and also to retain them and support them with the workplace culture of inclusivity and trust. So. Thanks, Kathy.